very important is to set expectations. As you've mentioned, is so we encourage every team leader, every manager to write a README about themselves.
One word I always like to use for questions like that is intentionality.
Tell them to have a very transparent communication system, because that's the key when you're working remote.
Bit of introduction to everybody who is new on the remote work, on our remote work meetup. We called it "We're Online" a while ago because we're kind of struggling with a remote term, right? I know it is the standard term used everywhere, but I'm always struggling with it because actually I have the feeling that when we are working in a remote setup, we're much closer to each other than we are when we are working in different office buildings. So I thought the fact that we are online is what we are actually taking advantage of, and that's how the "We Are Online" thing came together. And as I said, we eventually wanted to sort of do a local remote work meetup where the idea was to share knowledge on a global and on a large scale at least, and still have the opportunity to socialize locally, have a drink together, and discuss whatever is interesting and coming up to our minds. And that is what this remote work meetup is really about. So that's a meetup that is meant to share experiences and also have the opportunities to socialize. And I'm really looking forward to have the opportunity again to meet people in person. But for now, we're taking advantage of the fact that we are all online, which is great as well. And for everybody who has got the time to spend a bit more time afterwards, we can still share a drink online if you want to. As for the rest, I think we can jump into our meetup straight away, right? So Nora, may I hand over to you?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the introduction. So we decided to have a meetup about remote hiring. Of course, right now there are companies that stopped hiring, but there are also companies in which hiring became more important, and they are even hiring more people. And then there are companies that just needed to figure out how to hire remotely all of a sudden. And that's why we invited 3 different panelists with very different perspectives. So first of all, we have Marcus Wermuth as the engineering manager at Buffer. We have Surabhi, IT consultant at Robert Walters, and Michael Peter, HR director at Bitmovin. So we then invited these 3 people to have, on the one hand, the perspective of Marcus working at a completely remote company without any offices. We have Surabhi, the outsider's perspective, working as an IT consultant for different companies. And then we have the perspective of Michael with Bitmovin, working for a company that has offices, but not everyone is actually working at an office. Some people are working remote. So we just wanted to contrast these different perspectives. Now I would like to hand over the word to the panelists, and maybe you could tell a little bit more about your experience and also what your perspective on remote hiring, remote recruitment is. Marcus, do you want to start?
Sure, why not? Hey everyone, nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, as Nora said, I'm an engineering manager at Buffer. If you haven't heard of Buffer, we are a SaaS company building various products for companies to build their brands online. But the funny fact, and I think the more interesting fact, is that we are a fully remote company. We don't have an office. We are 90 people, I think, and we're from Australia over to the West Coast and in between. I've been working remotely for basically all my professional work life. I've been focusing a lot myself on leadership management. I'm also becoming a coach right now. So all of that is very important to me, especially in this remote work area. Why can I speak about hiring? I've hired a few people at Buffer, especially also on my team. My team, I think, is a funny, interesting note, is distributed from Taiwan, India, Germany, UK, and in 2 time zones in the US. So we actually can't get on a video call altogether. So that's an interesting fact. And that is also something that is represented in our hiring process that is very asynchronous. And that helps us with diversity, with inclusion, but also getting people into the way we work, where they join our Slack as a guest in a channel. They work on documents instead of just jumping on video calls. So I don't want to talk too much about it. We can talk about this further on, but that's, I think, my perspective that I can bring to the table.
Thank you very much. I was starting on the left side, so Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
If you let me.
Huh?
Peter, did you say
a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, we had a conversation now. We came from a client now, and we have built up a company last year. And we have like two positions, our company. One is saying, yes, it's possible to have a remote team, and the other saying he needs the paper in his hand. So it's him, and I'm the virtual guide. So there is a big discussion going on, and we might also switch to the virtual team. So it's really interesting to be here, and it's really the topic that we have today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a very interesting perspective sharing we're going to have today.
Mm-hmm. That's really relevant for us. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you here, and thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm leading the HR department at Bitmovin. So part of that is recruiting, and when I've joined, that was the main focus. We were growing quite heavily at that time, and first we were recruiting mainly in Europe. Companies founded in a small city in Austria. But we soon started to scale internationally. So we do have offices, but we also do have people working completely remote. We do have people who are preferring to work remote, but have the option to go to an office. So there are a lot of challenges within that, and happy to share you some of these insights, and also to you, Peter, that's having a split between completely remote and fully on-site. That's quite a challenging thing. So I better go with one or the other, because the middle path is maybe not always the easier one. So yeah, happy to have the conversation here.
Thank you very much. And Surabhi, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and also what your perspective is on remote hiring, remote recruitment?
Sure. Firstly, thank you all of you for having me here. I'm really privileged to be a part of this community and talk to you guys about recruitment. I am from the recruitment business, if I could say it like that. I'm an IT consultant leading a team of consultants in the recruitment space in Europe right now, majorly recruiting in Portugal. Interestingly, I recruit for all my clients, which are remote, but I myself, I'm in office today, and we recruit from office. So I can give you perspectives of how it is working from office, but really building teams and helping other companies work remote. That's really where we are right now. In terms of recruitment, we do all processes totally online. Everything is online. I'm majorly hiring for the tech business, so everything is evolving to be more remote. But the interesting change in things we're seeing is in perspective of other fields which are not remote, like sales and marketing or engineering per se. Now we are seeing a shift even in those industries going remote. So maybe I can share a little bit about my experience in hiring in those fields as well.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to ask Michael now we would like to have some more interaction with the audience. And Michael, you prepared a Mentimeter, so we can also get a little bit more perspective on on the ideas that our audience has on remote hiring and remote recruitment.
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, I thought it would be a good idea to get the conversation going, to ask that like general question, why would we do that, right? I mean, why would we hire remotely when obviously this is one of the most important decisions that we are taking as managers, as organization. And what's behind that? Is it because of rates of skills or what? And I would like to get your idea also from the audience. And I have added a link to the chat. So if you click on that link, you should be directed to a website where you can enter your five suggestions of what you feel why remote hiring is important, and then I would like to direct the conversation towards those topics a bit. I'll share my screen in the meantime. So what you're seeing here on screen, I hope you can see it. You can see it now. So we should see a word cloud here building up, containing everything that we're typing in here. But I see you're still thinking. Let's give us a bit of time for this. Okay, cloud is building up. Good. So we are seeing a few interesting topics here. Bigger talent pool, I think, was one of the first ones to show up. Saving money, hearing that.
I would challenge the saving money.
Yeah. Looking forward to having that conversation. Outreach to many clients, building superstar teams, find the right candidate, attractive job, increase loyalty, lean business, flexible schedule. Great. I think we have a very good basis for conversation already. So I think with this, we wanted to make sure that we're addressing the right points when we discuss why we should why we're doing that. And maybe Marcus, can you start again with your perspective on why remote hiring is important for you and at Buffer?
Yeah, well, the first thing is we are remote, so we have to. we can't just focus on one country. So by nature, we have to do it, but we also want to, of course. I think for Buffer, the whole remote thing started because the founders couldn't stay in one country because of visas. So they moved around and then suddenly started to notice, hey, we're just collecting all those people. Why not just be remote? So I think a big thing is, of course, to us, the diversity and the larger talent pool you get, whereas the diversity is becoming more and more important for us to not just hire people in the US, but open it up to the rest of the world and get also different perspectives, so it's a whole big topic. So I would say that it's definitely the larger talent pool, more talent from anywhere, and the diversity that is very important for us.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting take.
If I can add to what Marcus said, like for me, I come from the IT sector majorly, and even though we have a restriction in terms of sometimes in terms of Portugal, and then that's the reason why my clients decided to go remote, is because of the restriction with the number of people, even like the people in the IT sector are really small, and as soon as you make it remote, the pool becomes so much more larger for them, to add to what Marcus is saying. And in terms of resources, like a lot of companies come to Portugal because it's cheap. As soon as they went remote, they started targeting Asia, which is even more cheaper for them in terms of the quality of people that they're getting and the amount they need to pay. It's just because of the expense differences, and that's also I think a lot of people have highlighted here, cheaper, less cost, saves money. It's quite true. Companies do want to indulge in other markets where their currency is probably higher than those market currencies, if I can say it like that.
Okay. There's different perspectives on that, probably, right? I understand Michael had a different view on that topic.
Yeah, I think for us it was never the reason of saving $1 here or there. That didn't work out for us. I think there are different approaches when it comes to also the size of the company, I think. The reason why we had to start remote hiring was on the one hand side that we also needed a larger talent pool. We haven't been able to find the right skilled people within the office location we had. That was the main driver for us to open that up. What we are now trying to do is then clustering around that. And our Vienna office, for example, was also started as a remote thing. So there was one person, then another person joined, and they met from time to time in a coffee shop to exchange their ideas. And now we have more than 35 people in the Vienna office because it was growing. So that's the way we are approaching that. And that has been quite successful for us. And the other thing why we do have remote people is definitely for the customer interactions. I mean, we have people from Australia to Brazil and from San Francisco to Dubai. Most of them are interacting here face to face or very closely with our customers. And therefore you need to have, I mean, or until now, we always thought you need to have, someone close or someone in the region to be here effective. Yeah, I think you need to have someone who understands the market, regardless where they are located at the end.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think there is plenty of reasons for hiring remotely, and I think we've covered quite a broad range. Are there any comments from the audience, questions that or points of view that you would want to add to what the panelists have said already?
I also just saw 2 comments in the chat, one from Marcus and the other one from Talent True.
Yeah.
If I can... Paul, sorry, I'm using my company. So Paul is my name.
Paul.
Yeah.
So Paul, if I can add to what Marcus is saying, I understand when you and it's really nice to see that Marcus's company is paying as per Silicon Valley, but or San Francisco. But honestly, if you look at the cost per me, like there was a client which came to us and they said that they can only pay 500 euros per month, which of course is extremely low. It's probably an intern's cost in Portugal or even anywhere in Europe, right? But 500 euros in, say, an Indian, it's amazing for a person with 6-7 years of experience, and we might get some good talent. It's because 500 euro really converts into 50,000 Indian rupees, which is a really, really good salary. Okay, so I think it really depends on the market also that you're targeting in terms of cost. Of course, it's fair for everybody to pay the salary from one country, but then it's imagine a person being paid in India, San Francisco salary, he's probably a millionaire because it's going to be much, much more than versus what in terms of cost, it will be 1/5 versus the savings that he will have for irrespective of the person who's in Silicon Valley, who has so much more expenses. So I really believe that we need to take that notion also into consideration when we are looking at salaries for people.
Probably chat about, I didn't want to open up a discussion. I just wanted to share a context there. For us, we also, for example, multiply a cost of living factor to the base salary. So it's not just the base salary that we pay. It gets adjusted a little bit, but in the remote work field, there's always the discussion of paying one country or paying the salary of multiple countries. Like you have to find a way what fits best. Like that's how we do it. Not necessarily that's the best way. But yeah, the country gets factored in. And as I wrote, it kind of depends on how you set your company up, how you want your team and how you want your company to be structured. Like if what you say, is fine, then that's cool too. It just is important to make a decision and have it like shared for all of them.
Yeah, of course. It's just interesting to see all these. And it's amazing if a company is paying San Francisco salary for people around the globe, because they are one of the most paid people in that, around the world, at least right now.
There's others, for example, I don't know if you have heard of Basecamp or 37 Signals. They pay, I think, a Chicago-based salary. So I think it depends where the company is for that. So
true. Yeah.
I think it also depends heavily on this comment on the low cost, low quality. It depends really on one, the structure, and also in the field you're operating in. I mean, as a software company, you have a USP, you have a product which is either on the market or not. But before joining Bitmovin, I was in a big IT service provider. I mean, their IT or developing is a commodity thing. So of course you're shifting that towards the low-cost countries, and especially the headquarters guys. They were starting to come up with their Excel files where you can see one Austrian salary versus, I don't know, 3 Indian salaries, and then you start doing that. But I think that's at least for us at Bitmovin, that was never the reason why we need to do that or should do that.
I think there's a larger question. While we're at it, I'll just say it. That I have, like, I have to say this: the cost saving. It's really what your company wants. I think if you're a big company and you want to save money and hire 3 people in a lower, paid country, that's fine. But if you're a remote company, for example, us, I don't think that we're saving money by being all remote. Our retreat that we do yearly, which got moved because of Corona, it costs us 300,000 to 400,000 to get all the people together for a week. So if that's what you pay in rent for your office, you don't save that money. So the cost saving argument kind of is a bit tricky. It depends what you want from your company. If you just want to save money by not hiring someone in your country, but hiring someone somewhere else, that's okay. But if you want to set up a really remote company with the right culture and like a lot of good things that have been, proven by various companies, then I don't think you're going to save a lot of money.
True.
That's just my opinion.
What I think, Markus, you definitely can hold your employees with that good salary. If it's based San Francisco-based salary, so this is something you can have loyal one. You can have a big pool with the best candidates. You can get the top scorer of every county. So it's quite good strategy, and this will also affect on your product in the end. And we also started now to hire someone from the Philippines. It's a good recruiter. It's my first experience, and I would be very happy to pay her more. But currently we are not able because we are a startup, and we had to take someone from the Philippines. But comparing to the salaries there, it's a good salary. So we are starting with this. But this is also a philosophy that I share with you, and I think it has a big advantages. But most of the companies, especially not tech companies, they are really having the pressure of the market, and where the market is really not like in the IT or I think you are in the IT, somewhere in the IT. So there is another margin that you have, and in our business there is not that margin that you have. This is also a big issue that you need to consider. But generally, I like the strategy.
There's always a disclaimer, I think, to say that I think what everyone shares is always their perspective. How we do it, might work for us, but might not work for someone else. It's just interesting to hear various perspectives and then, take bits and pieces and make it work for yourself.
Yes, I think now everyone is coming out of their micro world, going out and seeing other businesses. And for me, it's very interesting to see, hey, there are remote teams. Wow, this is working. And for my colleague, for example, who is really like a grandfather comparing to me in IT, then it's amazing to see teams like you, and it's inspiring for me. And I really, someone who started a company last year here in Germany, especially here in my region where I live, people are not open for this kind of change, and they don't understand what is digital business, what does it mean. People are still doing their fabrics, going to their production lines, and this is the reality here. This is how we earn money here. But something on the computer software, this is far, far away. They need the papers in their hands. So thanks for sharing your the experience that you have.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I think we have. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Go ahead. I just had a question, just an open question. I'm curious to know because I only speak English. I don't speak any European language. But Marcus and Michael, both of them work in European companies. How is it in terms of language skills? Like, is it English, or how in general in the market? Like, how does it work for you guys? Because I see that in Europe, a lot of companies, apart from IT, they still want people to speak the local language. Those restrictions are still very common. So I'm just curious to know, how's your experience been? Does it kind of reduce your pool of candidates sometimes?
For us, company language is English. So that's a hard requirement. Starting from every intern up to the C-level, it's English. So that's important for us also to have that communication and to keep that communication up. I agree with here in Austria, a lot of claiming international companies, they're only looking for German-speaking candidates, and that's of course limiting. So whenever I see or get asked about, where should I apply with my or with limited German, I can only recommend to start with the startup world because they're quite flexible on that and quite open for that.
Okay.
Yeah, same for us. We have on our hiring page, when we hire a certain role, at least good writing and speaking skills. More so the writing than the actual speaking, but yeah, we do need someone that speaks English because we're across the world.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think there's plenty of reasons why we would do that, why we would hire remotely. And actually, there's one reason that I haven't heard, which I'm really glad about, but that was the reason why we had to do it, and that was actually Corona, because we just had to. There wasn't there wasn't another option. But obviously, that's not the best reason to do so. Thank you for that. I think now that we understand why we would do that, it would really be interesting to dive in a bit into the question: how are you doing that? What is your process like, and what would we need to consider and to take care of before we then in the next step jump into the actual challenges that our audience is still seeing. So if we could do a quick round on that would be really interesting. And please, everybody, feel free to ask questions whenever you feel you want to, because we don't have a fixed agenda that we need to go through, right? So it's a meetup, and it should feel like a meetup. Michael, do you want to start this time? How is it working at Bitmovin?
So yeah, how is it working? I mean, we do have certain roles which we would prefer to have in a certain area or location. So first, we are trying to fill that need, but quite often we get or see that this is limited by availability or other factors. And then we are opening up and being quite flexible on the location. And of course, with that, there comes some challenges, but that's the way we usually approach new hiring requests from the team.
Okay, I see. So the setup at Bitmovin is that you do have locations, and you try to find people locally, but that doesn't work always, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in Europe, we do have 4 offices, and the ideal scenario would be to have someone there. Yeah, it's not always working out. And therefore you need to be flexible. Just one recent example, we were looking for our VP of Finance, and we had certain requirements for that person. So they need to have SaaS background, they need to have B2B background, and so on and so forth. And the ideal candidate would have been in Klagenfurt. But we knew from the beginning that is not possible. So we need to open up the locations, and we have to be quite flexible. It was quite lucky that we ultimately found someone in Vienna, so that's pretty cool for us. But if we would have found someone in New York, I mean, he would have to deal with the team who is located in Austria and on the Philippines. So we would have also supported that.
Okay, I see. And in terms of actually doing it, how does it work? How do you find the candidates, and how do you decide on? What's the process like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's quite similar to what we are doing for on-site. Of course, the team get engaged and is working together with the hiring manager to define here the role they are looking for, and also starting to prospecting these candidates. And get a better understanding in general about the role, especially if it's something which we haven't recruited before. This can happen quite often in a startup which is growing, that there are roles we haven't touched before. So that's always very helpful for us to exchange here, or to get an idea of what this could look like. I think that's very, very important for us. Then we are using, of course, our normal techniques to get here our prospects, to get and convert them into candidates. We have, even before Corona, all of that happened, we had a lot of interviews via Zoom or Google Hangouts. So here we need to introduce from time to time people to how does that work. So we're now also sending a manual of where can I find the link for the Google Hangout, and how does that work, so that we can reduce here the challenges also on the technical side. People are then going through quite an extensive recruiting process. This is something which when I've joined, was a little bit against it, but soon realized that it makes absolutely sense, especially in a remote setup, to have here multiple stakeholders, the interviewing part, because then also the candidate has a good overview about what is culture like, what are the people I'm working with, and how do they operate in this remote setting. So just recently hiring someone in San Francisco, she had to go through interviews with some Europeans and some American colleagues. And after that conversation, she also mentioned that was very interesting for her and gave her good insight in how does Bitmovin's culture look like, because she experienced that firsthand during the interviews. And I think that the most challenging part for us is more on the setting the context right, having the same language. That can happen, that there is some cultural barriers, or also language barriers, that things we as an Austrian think are the right translation might be understood differently from the candidate. And then getting the people over the finish line can also be quite a challenge from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. Thank you. You're saying it's starting in a pretty similar way than you would start the process for a local position, right? Which is interesting, because I thought when we're hiring remotely, we are one of the reasons was access to a global talent pool, and when I think of a global talent pool, I think of 10,000 applications for a position. Is it like that, or is it still?
Unfortunately not, because as mentioned before with the VP Finance, we have a very clear picture of what we want to have, and it's very limited also, these kind of, someone who is meeting all of that requirements, also that is very limited, even on a global scale. Of course, it's bigger than just having it in Austria, Europe, or whatever location you would look like, but it's still quite a challenge. And and also then really converting people from being a prospect into a candidate is quite a challenging thing.
Okay, I see. So it's not like finding the needle in a hay situation, but like still a challenge to find good people even on a global scale.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it also depends a little bit on the role. Just
Mhm.
one example for one of the product managers, we were looking for, I think we reached out actively to almost 1,000 people. And these were really targeted people. I think we had ultimately more than 300 candidates and then had to process them through the whole process, which, as I mentioned before, is quite extensive. There is some take-it-home tests they have to do, and so on and so forth. So that was quite an investment, and ultimately we hired one after more than a year. But it was actually this one person we were looking for. So it is really depending on the role. The other side, if I look for a sales manager and being very open in the location in the US, you get quite a lot of applications. But yeah, most of them are not really fitting your needs.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Does mean remote hiring also that these people always work remote? Does this complicate it for me?
That's a good question, and something which I also have thought about. What's the definition of remote hiring? And for us, there are different definitions. I mean, the team at Bitmovin is located in Austria, so they're hiring a lot of people who are remote for them. So I don't know, hiring and solution architect in Singapore, and then someone in San Francisco. That is remote because it's challenging, because it's different cultural aspects, legal aspects you need to take into consideration. Also remote for us is hiring someone who we want to bring into the Austrian offices, because you also have your different challenges to deal with, like explaining how is the health system working in Austria, what are certain things that need to be taken care of, how is the migration process working. So there are different definitions of remote recruiting for us, and each of them applies different challenges we have to deal with.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Okay. So Marcus, do you want to tell us a bit about how it is working at Buffer?
Sure. I think it looks a bit different, probably also because of the company setup. So it's cool that we have so many perspectives here. So yeah, we do hire completely remote. So for us, there's normally no time zone limit, except for customer support roles. Sometimes we do hire for a specific role in Asia or the Western time zones. But overall, it's very, very open. One thing that I wanted to mention, because you mentioned the numbers of applications, we do get generally quite a lot. So depending on the position, we do get between 500 and 1,000 applications, which I consider quite a lot for us as a company. And I recently chatted with a German, also remote startup about that it really helps as a remote company to build a company brand. Buffer, for example, we're taking it to probably too high, but we're very transparent. We share a lot. We have our blog where we really share everything. Just this week, we shared that we're doing a 4-day work week experiment until December. So we share really everything and how we do things, how we do our retreats. So that helps to kind of, because you asked how we do it, that's how we source. We do use job boards and all of those things, but we also have a big brand that we kind of build out of ourselves, that people are generally interested in, follow along when there's an open position and when they can get in. So that's for example, one thing that helps us to source a lot of people. And then the process in general, so we get over a period of maybe 2 weeks, we collect a lot of applications. Generally, it stays open, I think, for 4. And then we have a new process, which I quite really like, and I would love to just explain a few bits here. I think we have 4 stages normally. First one is a culture chat. And I'm saying chat, although it's not a real video call anymore. Second one is team fit. So most of the times that's the manager interviewing, like, is that person actually fitting in the team? Third one is a role fit, like, does that person, can they actually do what they're supposed to do? And then the fourth one is more of a low-key one where it's maybe the VP or the higher C-level person just to check in. Is there anything that we need to check if that person fits into the team? And each stage functions a little bit differently. So the first one, very asynchronous, because that's how we work. We work in Slack, we work in Dropbox Paper, and that's what we want that person to experience, because I can tell you, it really shows who fits then into the team. Like, they get right into Slack in a channel, which is just them. And they get a document where there's questions, and we ask them to fill those questions in the next 2 days. This gives us so many ideas of how they write, how they communicate. Do they immediately change their profile pic or do they leave it? That gives you an idea of how active are they in Slack, how can they communicate. There were people that recorded Loom videos saying hi, and this is so cool, that immediately tells you, okay, cool, super culture fit or not, depending on what you want. So what I'm telling you is not what you should do, but this is how we made our process look like, because that's how we work. Second one then is the manager, like the team fit chat, whereas we have an asynchronous experiment where they have to fill in questions again. But then there's a 20-minute call, because I do one-on-ones every week and I want to see the person just on a quick video call just to get a feeling. And that's kind of what that replicates. Third one, because we hired an engineer, looks similar, where they get a take-home exercise. I think it's a couple of days they can work on. Of course, it's not too complicated. We also try to pay them for their time if they don't get hired. So they do that exercise, and then there's a small chat with that hiring team, mostly the senior engineer or someone on that team, to just chat about it a little bit. And the fourth one, similar to the other one. And that's the whole process. And then at the end, we hopefully make an offer to one person. And then they join the team, and then there's the whole onboarding process. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell how we do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions?
Yeah, I have one. So I'm a recruiter, and what I'm doing is I'm focusing solely on remote workers. And the question is, like, how important is that, like you talked about, Marcus, like for example, that they know how to use Slack, that they sort of like they can go straight into sort of using the tools that they're using. Like, because one of the things I focus on when I sourcing talents is their remote work experience. Like, so they have some experience from they're sort of like, they're not like someone who may be straight out of university and really want to work remotely. They start working remotely, they have no idea what they're doing, and so how important is that they have some prior experience to?
Well, we hired people that haven't worked remotely before, so it's not number one. I think, the tool questions, can they use Slack? I don't think it's that. It's more so how they communicate, right? So even if they worked in an office before and they know how to communicate well, they know, if they come in Slack to say hi or to do that, or to even ask a question if they don't know. If someone comes into Slack and asks me a question, hey, Marcus, I don't know how to get into Dropbox Paper. Can you help me? Sure, we can. Here's a document and a video that explains to you how you get in there. That's not a no for us, So it's showing that they can ask and how they communicate. That's more important here than actually knowing what the tool does.
In terms of like having some experience though, I was thinking, for example, if you go to an office and your computer stops working, you call IT. They come over and they fix it. Like if you're sitting somewhere else,
that's very basic.
Problem-solving ability, at least.
Yeah, you do. But then even there, if your computer dies down, there's a channel in how you can write an email to someone in our, people team to ask what to do, and they will help you. So. I mean, if you apply to a company that works remotely, I generally would say that you know how to at least navigate your computer. Like that's a very basic need. I would say you can expect. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions?
I just would like to know what the company is doing. Buffer, just in 2-3 words. That would be interesting to get the background information for what you're doing. Because your recruitment process is quite long and it seems to be really techy.
Yeah, well, we are kind of a tech company. I wouldn't say it's too long. It's good because it filters a lot and you get, good idea. You can argue, like shorter or not, but I think it works pretty well. So I've hired managers and ICs through that. So I think it works well. Buffer is a SaaS company. We're building products for companies to build their brand online, mainly on social media. We have various tools there. So you can check it out if you want to know more about that. I don't want to make a pitch out of that.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Great. So I would like to take a different perspective on that same thing again. Maybe Surabhi, you want to tell us your view on that? What's your perspective on that? How is it working?
Sure. Thank you. So for me, it depends. It really depends on the clients. Sometimes clients come to us they say they want remote candidates, but in a certain country, like remote. But if there is something that drops, they all should be able to meet and they should be able to work together. Sometimes that's a criteria. So of course, in those cases, we are limited to the country while we're looking for people who could work remote from home, but would still be available in that same country. But sometimes I would say the talent pool is much larger when the company is open to, say, the entire Europe or entire Asia. So that really depends on the company. In terms of the processes, I think most of the companies have a standard four interview stage thing, which is very similar to what Buffer also has. The first one being the connect with the HR, which is very related to the culture, the talent, just understanding the soft skills part. Second being mostly the technical rounds. The newer trends in technical rounds and remote interviews, what we're seeing is pair programming. That's probably the latest that we're seeing in the market, which is nothing but they do send them a test in the morning, but they want to see their approach of how they're dealing with the test during the call. So like we're in a Zoom call, but and sometimes my clients tell me that for us, it's okay if the candidate is calling his mom to ask the code result, but it's really about how he's approaching the problem and how he's really, looking, because it's typically like a day in their company. If they're able to solve the problem, it's a win-win for the company at the end of the day. So that's a very common new strategy to do the test as well as check the technical skills. And then either they do the technical questions then, or they have another round. And finally, if it's a startup, they also have a connect with, say, the CEO or some other people, or normally the head of the department, and that's about it. And then they typically roll out an offer. But this is a very common strategy we are seeing in most of the companies. 3 to 4 rounds. It's very, very common, irrespective of remote or not. But for remote, pair programming and these things are just more newer and more trendier, I would say, for the technology market.
Interesting approach. Thank you. Any other questions?
May I ask, Marcus, are you using pair programming?
We thought about it. What we did, it's again very customized to how we work. No, we don't. We do share a little exercise that's custom built, like that's related to our app, because I'm in the mobile team, so I hired for mobile team. So it was very specific to the app and also something they could work on. And then the second thing, which was very important for us, is we had them go through a PR review, a pull request review. For some of you that don't know, it's like when someone writes code, shares that with the other person, and they check and they kind of collaborate on it. So it's more asynchronous pair programming in a sense, but it gives you an idea of how that person communicates. Are they actually giving feedback, or are they just saying everything is cool? So that's what we did.
Okay, fantastic. Other questions? Okay, so thanks for the insights. It was really interesting to see very different perspectives on that matter. So now that we have learned a bit on how things are working in these 3 different situations, it would be interesting to see what the challenges really are, and also what challenges you guys are seeing and you would want to learn about. Like if you wanted to apply it in your organization, if you wanted to hire remotely, what challenges do you see? Where do you feel you can still learn from from our panelists. And for this, I would like to hand over to Nora again. We have also prepared a another Mentimeter page for you, and sharing it in a second. So sharing again. I think you should see it now, but we are still at the other page, right? Good. So differences, challenges, opportunities, stuff we want to learn. Nora, but maybe you can rephrase the question in your words.
Yeah. So the question is, what kind of challenges are you facing right now in your companies, if you are already hiring remotely or if you're trying to hire remotely? What challenges do you have? Or also, if you're not hiring remotely yet, what uncertainties do you have? What other questions do you have? So yeah, it's the same Menti link from above as Marcus just commented. So yeah, just go to the website. You can of course also just type menti.com and use the code, and just let us know in a few words what you're still interested in. Of course, if you're facing challenges that are hard to put in a few words, also feel free to turn on your microphone or write it in the chat to tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you have or the uncertainties. Remote team management, remote team building, how to trust each other. I'll just give it a few minutes, and as I said, feel also free to expand on it in chat or later if you want to turn on your microphone. Marcus, Michael, and Surabhi, I'm not sure if you're also currently submitting some answers, but feel free to submit your answers as well. Especially, I guess Surabhi has insights from many different companies and what struggles they've been facing.
Lots of interesting topics again. I think we need a follow-up probably, right?
So what I can see, I think so time zones, 2 times, also some problems with time management, change management, company culture. Of course, company culture already goes a little bit further. We actually, the last meetup that we had, we also discussed remote collaboration. We're soon going to upload the videos of our previous panel discussions and talks to YouTube. So feel free to check it out as well. And if there's interest in discussing more remote team culture, we can also organize another panel discussion about this. But maybe let's start off with Surabhi. Can you tell us, so as you've worked with different clients, can you tell us a little bit about the different challenges your clients have been facing? Where there's some commonalities, where there's some different challenges depending on the company? How was it?
Sure. Thank you, Nora. Sure. One of the very interesting things that keeps coming out is when my clients say that they need an extrovertish person for a remote work. I don't know if it's the same feeling that Michael and Marcus also have, but it's always the demand. Like, we need somebody extrovertish. He should always be smiling on Slack. I don't know what does that really mean, but that's one very interestingly trait, or that we hear from a lot of our clients, that they come up to us with this request. Of course, the other thing is about trust issues. That's, I think, in general there, because a few of our clients are still figuring out. We also have we've created an e-guide for a lot of our clients on how to go remote and trying to help them on things. But trust issues is very common. Seeing the person in front of you versus they don't know what's really happening online. Telling your teammates what time you go for lunch, what time you go for coffee breaks. Those are things which are very commonly addressed by candidates and clients. That there are these things which are still not 100% transparent. And of course, pay. Pay is a thing which comes very commonly because though I'm based in Lisbon, and Portuguese salaries are much lower than Central Europe salaries, so it also kind of then reduces the talent pool, because then we have to either see Portuguese or African or Asian countries, because then it is just in terms of the economy, versus when we go to Central Europe, the salaries just double up, so they cannot afford the person. That's also one major issue that we see across different clients in Portugal. If it's a Central European client, it is a better market for them, because then they go to Eastern Europe or Southern Europe where salaries are lower. It kind of works out better for them. So these are 2-3 different challenges that we see very commonly with our clients.
So trust issues, I think that's quite an interesting one, and I would like to follow up on that, because we actually also, just before the start of the panel discussion, we were discussing it a little bit, and that there's still a lot of companies very hesitant to employ people remotely because of these trust issues. So I would like to know from all three of you, how do you deal with that? So what strategies do you have to trust, to build trust with new employees? And so especially, like, how do you coach your clients? What tips do you give them?
Sure. So one thing that we tell them is that, of course, trusting them in terms of availability on different modes. They are available in Slack, of course, whichever tool the company is using, or for us, we use Teams, and we use the Facebook application for work, which is Workplace for Work. So being available there, answering within certain protocols. You could have those as initial protocols when people are just moving remote, like answering an email within half an hour, answering a message within 20 minutes. Like, those are the initial things, because we know that expecting the person to be sitting in front of the laptop is very key, important for clients in the beginning. To build that trust that they're available and they're really working and they're not sitting on the beach or gone out for drinks. Those are things which we try to do in terms of policies, and we try to educate our clients in terms of what they could do to bring this, to build the trust gap right now.
I think, well, from my experience, I think trust is, of course, something, well, that needs to be built over time, but I always find it very problematic if companies try to enforce rules such as, you need to answer to an email after, I don't know, within half an hour. I'm always like, okay, especially for tech people, and people who need to have some deep work, how do you actually get your work done if you need to check your email every 15 minutes? But so I would like to ask Marcus and Michael, how is it, how do you manage it? How is it for you?
Well, we don't have email. kidding. Well, we don't use it internally, but yeah, I think, as you said, trust isn't something you just built in a flick of a switch. It's built in the company culture. And then me as a manager, of course, you have weekly one-on-ones where you kind of build that, where you show your vulnerability, you're open. Like, transparency is a big thing in remote work. We're internally very transparent, even externally, but that's another story. But internally, being very open has multiple reasons, for documentation, communications reasons, but also for letting everyone know what's going on and building that trust in a team. So I think trust could be even another panel. Like, it's very deep, and it should come from the company culture and be built up, step by step. So there's always the argument, when you chat to, like, let's say, the older generation of, like, companies that have been built, I don't know, for the last 100 years. Well, we can't see that they're working, right? But, how do you do that in an office? You also don't go to the desktop and look what they're clicking on, Actually, the numbers say that remote work people are more productive and they work more. They're actually more prone to burnout, which is also a tricky thing, which we have here on the list with time management. So yeah, it's always, one argument against the other. And it's hard to convince people, I get that. But yeah, the trust building process is something that should come from everyone and should start with the company culture.
I think what we do share within the organization is a certain understanding of why people are joining the company, and they have an intrinsic motivation why they're joining the company. So with that kind of understanding, you lose this need for micromanaging people. You start to lose that need for sitting on someone's shoulder and watch what they're doing. But I think what is very important is to set expectations, and I think that's what you've mentioned. Is so we encourage every team leader, every manager to write a README about themselves. So what are the things they are expecting? There are so different ways of how people want to communicate, how different people want to be involved in certain aspects of their work. And if I know that, I can deal with that. If I don't know that, it's very challenging. So we encourage everyone to do and write up such a README about their leadership style. And I think the third one is, which is important for us, is that for us, it's not presence what we're paying, it's performance which we're paying. Therefore, we need to set clear expectations on goals, on what and how we want to achieve here together. And I think with these three, you can build up trust, and it needs to be the other way around. So you don't need to get trust. You need to do something to lose the trust in it. And that's the way we are dealing with that.
Plus one to that, remote work is very outcome-based and not hour-based.
Although, as you mentioned, it can be a lot of hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe let's continue a little bit with this point, especially also because people mention it here as well. So as you just said, remote work is outcome-based and not necessarily hour-based. But on the other hand, without going too far into this big topic of burnout, but on the other hand, especially if you have people who haven't worked remotely yet, how do you deal with setting expectations and also, well, in a certain sense, then preventing burnout and helping them to set up a schedule? How do you assist new employees?
I have the exact problem right now in my team. Where someone new joined the team and likes to work, but works a lot, so what do you do? What I'm doing, I can just share that quickly, is like being open with that person, telling them, hey, this is not okay for you, for your health, but also your signals that you're sending to the rest of the team are, you're setting the expectations higher than they actually are. And then what helps us, because it's a new person, because you've asked for new hires, we have a buddy system when we hire. So you have your manager, and then you have a culture buddy and a role buddy. And that culture buddy generally should talk about, with that person, or like what is expected from you, when should you be online, or like when, you know, how do you chat to other people? So that buddy system really helps us. And one thing that's good for us though is that our team is very async and we don't have a lot of calls, especially my team. So there's not the necessary like presence. You have to be like green on Slack for all the time, you know? So, but yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention is the buddy system that helps new hires to kind of, you know, be held accountable and also be able to ask questions.
Would you like to explain how that buddy system works remotely?
Yeah, I didn't see who asked that, but never mind. That's cool. Yeah, so when you get into Buffer, you have your manager and then you get assigned to buddies, to people in the team. Likely they are closer to your time zone if possible. So you have one that is in a similar role. And then you have someone that is a good sponsor for our culture, that can explain to you a lot, that, you know, lives the culture in a good way. And then they're just there for you and you have weekly chats with them and can talk to them and ask them questions in conjunction with our onboarding document where, you know, like for the first 15 days, it's explicitly tells you what to do. It's like chat to your culture buddy, you know, chat to your role buddy, just to get an understanding and ask questions like, how do I expense my, you know, chair? How do I, you know, tell everyone that I stopped working, and all those things that you then ask them. So it's basically just two people that hopefully are close to your time zone so that you have them as a good resource.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I just saw another question pop up from Paul in the chat. What are your opinions on tools that monitor what people are doing on their computers?
Not a fan, not a fan.
Probably not.
Surabhi, have you already worked with clients that are using those kind of tools, and what is your opinion on it?
I'm
Your
not,
experience?
honestly. I haven't. I do have clients who use them, but I'll be honest. Like I don't think they're effective, because I have seen not now, but like when I had just passed out of college and we had joined, you know, our first jobs. I had friends who would, where we all are working remote, and there are people just, you know, touching the screen, so it pops up the light and it says you're online, but they're not actually working. So I'm not sure how effective they are, on a very honest confession. But I don't know. I don't know much about how do they work, how do they really measure the outcome of the person working.
Okay, thank you. And what other tips do you have from your perspective? What other tips do you give your clients?
So in terms of clients, we do tell them to have a very transparent communication system, because that's the key when you're working remote, right? Like I said, clients do come up to us and say that we need extrovertish, but there isn't anything like that. It doesn't mean that the person will keep chatting with you or talking to you, or I don't know, be live all the time. It doesn't mean that. But yeah, of course we do, and then we do try to tell them that you have to educate them on the traits, that if you want the person to be, say if he has finished something and he needs to pass on this kind of a project to another person in another time, so then of course those things will follow when you start educating them and having a clear communication system internally, and starting from the code. Like it has to be top down. It cannot be like somebody, anybody randomly starting something new. So it has to be a top-down approach that clients need to take in terms of how they want to have team communication, how they want to approach certain problems. That's something that's the key that helps in remote work, at least in my feeling of when we work with different clients, and also when I was working remote for a short while. I think that's the major thing.
Thank you. Michael, do you still wanted to share your insights about it? Or are there any other questions? Classic with too many owners, I just saw here in the chat.
Yeah. That's really a classic one. And I also had that conversation, and you need to educate you a little bit, for especially first-time founders, because they think everybody should be at least as committed to the business as they are. And that's definitely not the case. I mean, that's the reality, and they need to understand that it doesn't mean that people are then lazy or not committed or whatever. It's just that they have a different stake within that organization and therefore other priorities as well.
Okay. So from the feedback that we've received, I still see another pattern or cluster of questions about equipment, who pays for the equipment, co-working spaces. As said, I think team culture, well, we touched a little bit upon team culture, but of course here we're going into a completely different and very, very big topic, which, as said, maybe we'll keep for another panel discussion. But let's talk a little bit about equipment. So first of all, can you share a little bit your insights? How do you do it in terms of equipment? Who pays for it? How is it with co-working spaces? Does the company pay for it or not? What is your stance on it?
I think one thing I've added was contracting, and that correlates a little bit. That's always a little bit a challenge for us, how to contract someone. I mean, there are several possibilities how you want to do that, and with them a lot of legal questions are coming up, and as well as the equipment here. I mean, for us it's we want our people to be as productive as possible, and this shouldn't be, there shouldn't be having a certain laptop or Mac or whatever here being a blocker on that. So what we are doing, we are providing everyone here the equipment they do need. Of course, we're challenging it from time to time. It's not necessary that every salesperson needs to have the strongest MacBook. So that's something which we're challenging, but usually that's nothing where we see a blocker. Same is on the office side. I mean, especially in the US, people are traveling a lot, so we find it quite comfortable to have here such collaboration with WeWork or this kind of bigger networks where they have or the possibility to use meeting rooms, to use here the office settings in the different locations. So we are providing that for all our employees.
Cool.
I can, similar to what Micah said, the contracting, of course, is different, especially when you're very global. But there's a few new companies coming up that hopefully help solve that problem. There's a company that is even in Portugal called remote.com that will hopefully help with, getting people into your company from all over the place. There's various others, but I think that's the most recent and advanced one. We have, I think, 2 entities, and we use also PEOs to help with that. Buffer also pays for the equipment for the MacBook. We have, as Michael said, we do challenge it already. We have like good MacBooks for engineers and lesser, process power for other people. We have a $500 office stipend when you join, so you can build your desk and your chair. And then we have a $200 yearly budget that you can use. Buffer also pays for the co-working space. If you want to go, then you don't get the office stipend though. And then what I use is we also have, if of course Corona isn't happening, we have a coffee shop stipend. So Buffer gives us money, $200 I think a month, to work out of a coffee shop and pay for coffee and be a good citizen and not just sit in Starbucks. So yeah, we have various other benefits, but I think those are the most equipment-y ones. Yeah.
Interesting. So for what I can tell you is that something which is very commonly that has started, at least in the European market, is that a lot of my clients who are going remote are hiring people who are in the freelancer visa, or who convert themselves as a freelancer and then they bill the clients. That's a very common thing. It is legally also, it is helpful for all of them, even if they're in some other country, and they save on the international taxes, because if you're say billing somebody in US, you do not pay the local taxes for that. So that's something which is very commonly that a lot of our clients are doing. In terms of office equipments, it really depends on the company. If they have the budget, they have an they give the budget to the candidates, and then they can accordingly buy their equipments. Sometimes it's an open budget. It doesn't mean that you need to buy an office chair or something. You could just buy something else, just a laptop or some other additional equipments that you want. But it really depends on the budget of the client. It's very open-ended over here in this sense.
Cool. Thank you. Are there any other questions? For some reason, the screen was flickering, so that's why we just turned it off. I think it wasn't just on my computer, but it was, I think you all saw the screen flickering, right? So are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Just like classic workplace, you have team building, which is like on site. You go somewhere maybe as a group, or maybe just have like a day where you get together, you sort of have team building. How do you, in a remote setting, do you have any systems in place? Do you do any team building virtually or anything like that?
Yeah, so we invested much more now, starting with Corona, because more people are now in remote, and they were used to have that office setting. So for them, it was quite important. It soon started that they have a beer together in the evening online. We started to have trivia nights, which we had with the team. We had a live cooking show. So there are a lot of these kind of activities that you also have an informal connection with people. One thing which we also introduced is for Slack, there is an app called Donuts, which just randomly matches you with people. And that's definitely something which we will keep forever, because I think it's a great opportunity that people are from the different departments, from the different locations, are meeting for a coffee chat and introduce them to themselves. So yeah, definitely investing also on that side in a remote setting.
One word I always like to use for questions like that is intentionality, which is the same question, like, oh, how can you replicate the water cooler chat exactly with what Michael said? We use Donut, or we used it too. You have to be very intentional about like the team building things. We do have a yearly retreat where everyone gets together, and we have a full week where we do things like that. But then outside of that, it is a challenge, especially because we're very distributed. So in my team, actually, that's something I've been thinking about a lot the past few weeks. How can I do this with my team? Because, playing a trivia game or playing another game is kind of very hard with everyone being in another time zone, So I've been thinking around that, and there's not too many solutions yet. So you have to be a bit creative, but there's ways, to integrate the team and helping you figure that out. We also had something called icebreaker chats where you chat about certain topics. There was another tool. So there's various ways. And one thing, I don't want to, mention a specific thing, because I think it's important that you experiment with that and see what works and what doesn't. Because it's still so, like, if you're very remote and very distributed, your setup will look and behave a different way than mine, than Michael's, than, all the other companies. Then it's, you have to experiment and just make time for it. I think that's important. Not to just lose it,
Just received another interesting question. How do you deal with conflict between two colleagues? That's of course also something it's a little bit harder to manage remotely than it is an office setting, maybe. What do you think?
I think I've faced this recently. I can share my experience from my team. What I did was I just brought them both in a room. In this case, a video room of Zoom, and it was the best way to talk it out, because sometimes when you're chatting, somebody says something, the understanding is something else. It may not be the best way to resolve it. So sometimes it's just talking it out. It just helps. It's like when you fight with your siblings, your mom used to make you sit in front of each other. It's like just talking it out. I think sometimes that the old school methods just work and help you in that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we do the same here, trying to bring that problem up. I think that's the most important thing. that people are talking about the underlying problem and not on the results out of that. This is simply on communication. And here it's regardless whether it's in a room face-to-face or it's in a Zoom room face-to-face. I think the same principles applies, and that's candid feedback and clear communication. And that's the most important factor here.
Cool. Any other
Great.
questions?
We have 4 minutes left of our official time. If you don't have a question on that, I would like to. I would have one last question to our panelists, and that is, if you would want to give a quick advice to anybody applying to one of your remote work positions, what would that be?
Learn how to communicate well in written form.
You took
All right.
my point away. I think I was about to say the same. Communication is the key, like really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can only agree. It's all about communication. It's the most critical skill you need to have, especially in a remote setting. Whether it's written, I mean, a lot of things happening in writing due to the time zone and asynchronicity of that. But yeah, it's communication.
How can
Okay.
you improve them? Is there any online course, any book you can suggest?
How to communicate?
No. How you can improve the communication skills?
Yeah.
Because
So two things I think are very, very, I can really recommend is, one is Erin Meyer on Culture Map, understanding a little bit the cultural differences in communication. And the other one is, I think also no-brainer is about Radical Candor from, I don't know her first name, Scott's, whatever. So these are really two recommendations, I think.
if you can write it down in chat box would be great.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
I just had to laugh because I also recommended Culture Map already to several people. So yeah, that's an important one. I would, well, for the perspective also of a language teacher, Grammarly.
Yes.
Oh, good one. Yeah.
I was about to say, even books that are about writing in general are very helpful. How to, get your message across. There's one I can recommend. It's just for writing books. I think in general, it's called On Writing Well. It's an older one, but very good for, really digging deep into writing.
Writing well.
On Writing Well. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
I will also put a book in the chat, which is specifically good for German speakers. So, well, of course, not every team here communicates in English, so it might be interesting for some German speakers. So, put it in the chat as well.
Thank you very much. So that was an interesting set of tips. I also have a Carinthian background, and yeah, just like many people from Carinthia, I am now also in Vienna. That was started with economic reasons, so I can relate what the Bitmovin is struggling with a bit. It might be different nowadays. But having mentioned Carinthia and also maybe the valley, in terms of communication, there's one guy that I would like to mention, and that is Mr. Václavik. He's a Carinthian guy and has written a few very interesting books, but that is more on I think communication always starts with yourself, right? Bringing yourself into the right mood, and that is yeah, quite a great guy. A nice read also.